Beneath the cathedral canopy of the Amazon rainforest, where sunlight filters through a layered mosaic of leaves, the air is thick with humidity and tension. Vines curl like arterial veins across the undergrowth, moss clings to bark like living velvet, and every square meter hums with the low frequency of life, unseen, unheard, but always in motion. This is a world shaped not by conquest but by patience. In this cloaked realm, the true apex predator is not loud, not fast, but silent, and his presence is defined less by his movements and more by the absence he leaves behind. The jaguar, Panthera onca, does not chase. It waits. The jaguar is a master of calculated stillness. Unlike the cheetah's sprint or the lion's charge, the jaguar's strategy is one of deliberate invisibility. Its rosette-patterned coat is not just ornamental, it is camouflage engineered over millennia to match the dappled interplay of shadow and light on the forest floor. This adaptation renders the animal almost undetectable in its element, especially in the dim half-light of dawn and dusk when it hunts most effectively. Vision alone is not the jaguar's advantage. It sees with its ears, moves with its muscles held in liquid tension, and breathes in the chemical conversations of the forest through a Jacobson's organ that reads scent like language. Territorial dominance is essential in this predator's world. A single male may range across 50 square kilometers, a domain crisscrossed by invisible lines demarcated with urine, claw markings on trees, and scat deposited at strategic locations. These chemical signals serve not only as boundaries, but as updates in a constantly shifting network of occupation, courtship, and conflict. Where human laws are codified and spoken, the jaguars are feral and olfactory, updated daily with musk and intent. The scent tells all: who passed through, how recently, and what state they were in. Healthy, in heat, stressed, dominant. This is how jaguars navigate territory without confrontation. It is a system designed to avoid costly battles, where the loser might survive but not recover. Unlike most big cats, jaguars are consummate swimmers. Water in the Amazon is not a barrier but a corridor. During the wet season, when the forest floods and rivers swell into the canopy, the jaguar's world triples in depth. What was once ground becomes submerged gallery, and this predator slips through it with ease. Its short, muscular limbs propel it through the water with surprising agility, and its dense build allows it to stay submerged for extended periods, a capability few terrestrial carnivores possess. This water adaptation is more than behavioral, it's anatomical. Jaguars have a more robust thorax and a thicker neck than their African and Asian cousins, giving them a low center of gravity that stabilizes them in the current and aids in drowning prey. This aquatic proficiency grants the jaguar access to prey unavailable to other big cats. Capybaras, caimans, and even large river turtles are within its reach. The jaguar's bite, arguably the most powerful pound for pound among big cats, is specifically evolved to pierce bone. Where lions suffocate and leopards bleed, jaguars kill by crushing. With jaws capable of exerting nearly 1,500 pounds per square inch, they aim directly for the skull, the cervical spine, or in the case of armored reptiles, the temporal bones just behind the eyes. This biomechanical advantage allows the jaguar to exploit food sources considered too dangerous or too well defended by other predators. In doing so, it fills a unique niche in the Amazonian food web, that of the bone crusher, the breaker of shells, the silent judge of amphibious life. Prey selection is opportunistic but strategic. Tapirs, peccaries, sloths, and monkeys are taken when conditions allow. But the jaguar's choice often depends on the forest's hydrological rhythm. In the dry season, its range contracts and kills occur on land, swift, surgical, and often from ambush. In the wet season, it hunts along riverbanks, where hoof prints in the mud and the ripple of water betray the presence of drinking herbivores. The jaguar adapts not by changing who it is, but by expanding what it is capable of. The forest itself participates in this predator's ritual. Birds fall silent in its presence. Small mammals freeze mid-motion. The underbrush, usually restless with rustle and chirr, becomes eerily still. For the jaguar does not broadcast intent, it erases it. Unlike pursuit predators who use sight and speed to close gaps, the jaguar closes the gap before its prey knows a chase has begun. Its approach is so quiet that even the directional hearing of agoutis and monkeys often fails to register its arrival until it is far too late. Reproductive behaviors are equally shrouded in mystery. Solitary by nature, males and females meet only for mating, triggered by hormonal cues embedded in scent trails. Cubs are born blind and helpless, concealed in caves or thickets. They remain with their mother for up to 2 years, during which time she teaches them the laws of their world, how to stalk, when to strike, and what to fear. Mortality is high, competition is fierce, and only those that master the art of invisibility will one day rule a territory of their own. The jaguar's ecological role as apex predator is not just symbolic, it's regulatory. By preying on both herbivores and mesopredators, jaguars help balance population dynamics and prevent cascading ecosystem shifts. Without this pressure, populations of capybaras or peccaries can explode, leading to overgrazing and destabilization of the forest floor's regenerative cycle. This top-down control exemplifies a principle known as trophic cascade, where the presence or absence of a predator indirectly affects the abundance of vegetation, insect life, and even soil composition. In this way, the jaguar is not just a hunter, it is an architect of the rainforest. And yet, for all its power and presence, the jaguar remains largely invisible to human eyes. Rarely seen, frequently heard only in rumor or track, it is a ghost threaded through a living maze. To see one in the wild is to witness a fragment of the jungle's original language, untamed, unbroken, and unchanged by time. In the Amazon, power doesn't roar. It whispers, it waits, it watches, and then in a flash of golden muscle, it ends the conversation. The jaguar does not negotiate. It enforces. There are no warning cries when the forest begins to move. No predators roar, no snapping of branches under massive weight. The silence, paradoxically, is a signal. Beneath the leaf litter, in the wet seams between tree roots and fallen bark, it begins. A subtle tremor, a ripple through the mulch. Then all at once it unfolds. A living tide of mandibles and legs. The swarm is not one creature but many, and it does not hunt like a jaguar, does not stalk like a snake. It consumes, it surrounds, it dismantles. These are army ants, particularly Eciton burchelli, one of the Amazon's most notorious collective predators. In numbers that can exceed 200,000 individuals per colony, they orchestrate raids that reconfigure the very structure of the forest floor, if only temporarily. Where they pass, only silence and bones remain. To understand the ecological power of army ants, one must abandon the traditional model of predator and prey, individual versus individual, and instead envision an entire organism distributed across tens of thousands of moving bodies. The colony behaves as a singular fluid intelligence, scouting, surrounding, dispatching, and processing prey in real time, without centralized command. This is swarm intelligence, a decentralized, emergent form of decision-making where simple rules followed by individuals produce complex, adaptive group behavior. Each ant, guided by pheromone trails and tactile signals, operates within a limited local context. But the outcome is astonishingly precise, an ever-adapting kill machine that can respond to environmental changes within seconds. The raid column, stretching for tens of meters through leaf litter and across branches, is segmented into specialized roles. At the edges, aggressive soldiers with oversized mandibles patrol for threats and create a living barricade. Along the center, miner workers hustle back and forth, transporting larvae, food, and prey fragments. In front, the vanguard fans out like a net, probing microhabitats, cracks in bark, curled leaves, loose stones, and flushing out everything from beetle larvae to scorpions. The ants do not discriminate. Any animal small enough to subdue, regardless of taxonomy, is fair game. Evolution has not bred them for selective taste, but for efficient elimination. Army ant colonies are nomadic. Unlike many eusocial insects that construct permanent hives, Eciton burchelli lives on the move, forming temporary bivouacs, living nests made from their own interlocked bodies, which are dismantled and rebuilt as the colony progresses. Every 2 to 3 weeks, they shift locations, migrating in massive columns across the forest floor. These migrations serve both ecological and thermoregulatory purposes. By abandoning depleted foraging zones, they allow prey populations to recover. By moving regularly, they avoid overheating and predation from specialized parasites that exploit stationary nests. Their mobility is also key to their ecological role as disturbance agents. They leave behind a wake of exposed soil, scavenged carcasses, and upended food webs. But the story of army ants is not just about destruction. It is also about dependency. Over 60 species of birds, primarily antbirds, ant tanagers, and wood creepers, have evolved to follow these columns in a phenomenon known as ant following. These birds do not eat the ants themselves. Instead, they exploit the chaos of the raid, picking off insects and arachnids attempting to flee the swarm. This creates a complex multi-level predator cascade. The ants disturb the prey, the birds capitalize on the disturbance, and in turn some insects, like certain beetles and flies, mimic the ants or the birds to gain protection or access to food. In this entangled network, the army ants function as ecosystem engineers, reshaping behavioral patterns far beyond their own immediate survival. From an anatomical perspective, army ants are a study in specialization. Soldiers possess disproportionately large mandibles, capable of slicing through the chitin armor of other arthropods. These mandibles do not open and close with muscular control like a crab's claw, but instead operate as spring-loaded traps, requiring mechanical resets after use. Highly effective in combat, but inefficient for manipulation. Workers, on the other hand, are equipped for rapid mobility and transport. Their sensory organs are finely tuned to detect chemical gradients, allowing them to interpret the density and direction of pheromone trails left behind by scouts. Even their feet are specialized with hooked claws for gripping uneven surfaces. Essential for creating the vertical chains and bridges the swarm often constructs to traverse gaps and terrain. Prey defense strategies against army ants are equally diverse and illuminating. Some insects exhibit death feigning, a form of thanatosis where they remain motionless and unresponsive, betting on the chance that the swarm will pass over them. Others have evolved chemical repellents that mask their presence or render them unpalatable. There are even species of spiders and roaches that live inside the bivouac itself, having evolved biochemical camouflage that allows them to walk among their predators unmolested. These adaptations illustrate a core evolutionary principle. When faced with overwhelming force, survival often favors subversion, not confrontation. Interestingly, the army ants' reproductive strategy reflects the rhythm of their raids. Colonies are synchronized to the life cycle of the queen's egg-laying. During the nomadic phase, when the queen lays fewer eggs, the colony moves daily, conducting aggressive foraging raids to fuel growth. In the statary phase, when egg production surges, the colony settles, raiding less frequently and focusing energy on raising brood. This alternation reflects a finely tuned energy economy, ensuring that the colony's needs do not outpace its capacity to feed. The forest responds to the passage of army ants in measurable ways. In their wake, prey species temporarily vacate affected zones, small predators shift hunting strategies, and scavengers descend on half-consumed remains. Soil microbial communities benefit from the redistribution of organic material, while nutrient availability briefly spikes due to the decomposed prey and discarded fragments. These cascading effects extend far beyond the visual drama of the swarm, subtly influencing regeneration cycles and plant-insect dynamics in ways still not fully understood. In observing army ants, we are forced to confront an unsettling truth about nature, that complexity does not always require consciousness. There is no central intelligence in the column, no general directing strategy. The horror, or the awe, lies in the realization that blind, simple agents, governed by chemical codes and evolutionary programming, can create outcomes so synchronized, so lethal, and so ecologically consequential. In this sense, the swarm is not just a predator, but a force, closer to fire than to fang. And yet, for all their ruthless efficiency, army ants are vulnerable. Heavy rains, habitat fragmentation, and temperature fluctuations can disrupt their columns, drown their nests, or break their foraging paths. Their dependence on connectivity makes them especially sensitive to deforestation. As the forest fragments, so too does the swarm's dominion. And with it, the intricate cascade of ecological roles they underpin, from the birds that follow to the microbes that flourish in their path, begins to unravel. In the Amazon, the jaguar may rule the top of the food chain. But here on the forest floor, the rain belongs to the many, a democracy of destruction, a living river of legs and mandibles that neither thinks nor hesitates. It devours because that is what it was shaped to do. And in that devouring, it gives shape to the forest itself. In the upper tiers of the Amazon rainforest, where the sun filters through 100 layers of foliage and the air clings wet and warm to every surface, movement is a language of risk. Speed attracts attention. Noise draws predators. Every branch creak, every flutter of leaves becomes part of a surveillance system far older than humankind. And in this highly evolved system of eyes and ears, wings and whiskers, one animal has achieved survival not by outrunning danger, but by disappearing from it entirely. Not into the shadows or the distance, but into stillness so complete, so continuous, that it borders on ecological invisibility. This is the strategy of the sloth, a mammal so slow, so passive in the eyes of most observers that it has often been misunderstood as simple or lazy. In reality, it is one of the rainforest's most remarkable examples of evolutionary precision. The sloth, of which there are two primary genera in South America, Brodipus, three-toed, and Choloepus, two-toed, is not merely a slow mover. It is a highly specialized organism built around metabolic conservation. Every aspect of its physiology has been sculpted to minimize energy expenditure. With a body temperature that fluctuates more than any other mammal in the region, averaging between 30 to 34 degrees Celsius, the sloth walks a fine thermoregulatory line. Unlike typical endothermic mammals that burn calories to maintain a constant internal temperature, sloths let their environment dictate much of their heat. This reliance makes them exquisitely sensitive to cold rain or cloud cover and restricts their activity to favorable windows of warmth, generally mid-morning to early afternoon. To move outside of that range would cost more energy than they can afford. In the wild, survival is often framed as a contest of strength, aggression, or cunning. But the sloth reminds us that energy itself is a resource. And in the nutrient-poor canopy of tropical rainforests, it may be the most valuable one. Sloths are primarily folivores, feeding on leaves that are high in cellulose, low in protein, and laced with plant-defensive compounds like alkaloids and tannins. Their stomachs, multi-chambered and home to a slow-working microbial fermentation system, can take days or even weeks to digest a single meal. In some individuals, over one-third of their body weight may consist of stomach contents in varying stages of breakdown. This method of digestion, while time-consuming, allows them to extract what little energy exists in the leaves they consume, and in turn, reinforces the logic of their sluggishness. Every movement is a cost, and nothing in their design supports waste. But energy conservation alone does not shield them from predators. The sloth's primary defense is its camouflage, and not merely by coloration, but by biological transformation. In a rare example of active symbiotic camouflage among mammals, sloths host entire ecosystems on their fur. Algae grow within grooves in the sloth's coarse hair, turning their coats green during the rainy season and blending them seamlessly with the mosses and lichens of the canopy. This algae is not passive. It is facilitated by moisture-holding microstructures in the fur and in turn feeds a host of other organisms, beetles, moths, mites, and fungi, some of which are known to exist nowhere else but in the fur of sloths. This micro-ecosystem offers both camouflage and, in a few studied cases, antibiotic properties that protect against skin infections or parasites. In this way, the sloth is not simply part of the rainforest, it becomes a microcosm of it. From above, birds of prey, particularly harpy eagles, are among the sloth's few serious predators. With talons the size of grizzly bear claws and vision calibrated to detect the faintest movement among the foliage, these raptors are unforgiving. Yet sloths avoid them not through escape, but through near total stillness. They spend up to 90% of their lives hanging upside down, motionless, from tree limbs, often blending so well with the vegetation that even trained researchers can walk beneath them unaware. Their limbs are long, curved, and supported by tendons that lock into place, allowing them to hang for hours, even days, without expending muscular energy. In some instances, dead sloths have been found still clinging to branches, a final testament to the structural genius of their anatomy. The risks of movement are so significant that sloths descend to the ground only once every 5 to 7 days, usually to defecate, an act that lasts several minutes and leaves them vulnerable to attack. The evolutionary puzzle of why they do this, rather than simply relieving themselves from the trees, has inspired considerable debate. Some hypotheses suggest it facilitates fertilization of specific tree species. Others argue it aids in maintaining the ecosystem in their fur, where moths lay eggs in the dung and the larvae return to the fur as adults. A full life cycle anchored in this vulnerable behavior. Whatever the reason, it represents one of the sloth's few concessions to motion, and it remains one of its most dangerous rituals. Sensory adaptations are also shaped by this strategy of minimalism. Sloths have poor eyesight and hearing, relying instead on tactile and olfactory cues. Mothers communicate with their infants through low-frequency vocalizations and touch, a form of bonding and orientation that begins within days of birth and continues for several months. Juveniles ride on their mothers' backs and slowly learn foraging routes, preferred trees, and predator avoidance tactics. Unlike many mammals that rely on social groups or high reproductive output, sloths invest heavily in a few offspring, ensuring that survival is embedded in learned behavior as much as instinct. What makes the sloth particularly fascinating from an ecological perspective is its role as a biological middle ground. It is both consumer and substrate, both prey and ecosystem engineer. Though it does not shape the forest through force or numbers, it anchors a quiet web of interspecies relationships. From the algae that shade its skin, to the fungi that live in its fur, to the moths that cycle through it like pollinators. In this way, the sloth's stillness becomes more than a survival tactic. It becomes a stabilizing presence in the chaotic flux of rainforest life. And yet, this specialization comes at a cost. The sloth is extremely vulnerable to habitat fragmentation. Its arboreal lifestyle requires continuous canopy, corridors of connection that allow it to move slowly but securely from tree to tree. Roads, logging, and deforestation create gaps too wide for sloths to cross, leaving them stranded, exposed, and easily picked off by terrestrial predators or killed by human structures. Their success in a stable ecosystem is precisely what makes them fragile in a changing one. They are not adaptable generalists. They are ecological masterpieces carved for a very specific world, one where slowness is strength and invisibility is survival. To observe a sloth in the wild is to witness a paradox. Here is a mammal that challenges every intuitive understanding of what it means to thrive. It does not dominate, it does not defend, it does not flee, and yet for millions of years it has persisted, quietly weaving its biology into the architecture of the trees. It teaches us that speed is not the only measure of intelligence, that movement is not the only way to endure, that in the heart of one of the most vibrant, active ecosystems on the planet, survival sometimes belongs not to the fastest or fiercest, but to the one who waits, who blends, and who trusts the forest to do the rest. In the rainforest's underlayer, just inches above the wet soil where fungus blooms and decomposing leaf litter fuels the forest's endless regeneration, color takes on a new role. Here, nestled among mossy roots and shadowed crevices, color is not about attraction or camouflage. It's a declaration. Tiny flashes of electric blue, blazing yellow, and searing orange break the monotony of brown and green like live wires scattered across the forest floor. These are not idle flourishes of tropical excess. They are survival signals, chemically backed, evolutionarily fine-tuned, and lethally effective. These are Dendrobatidae, poison dart frogs, and their existence is a masterclass in biological risk and biochemical warfare. Despite their vivid appearance, most poison dart frogs are no larger than a human thumb, but their size belies their influence. Their defenses are not muscular or behavioral, but molecular. These frogs carry potent alkaloid-based toxins in their skin, accumulated not by internal synthesis, but through dietary intake. The frogs do not create their poisons from scratch, rather they sequester and refine compounds found in their prey, mostly ants, mites, and small beetles, whose own chemical defenses are the raw material for the frog's arsenal. This diet-dependent toxicity means that frogs raised in captivity, fed on domestic insects, often lack their trademark lethality. It is the rainforest itself, with its specific trophic web and chemical gradients, that arms them. The alkaloids found in poison dart frogs number in the hundreds, and their effects range from local irritation to complete neuromuscular paralysis. Some species, like Phyllobates terribilis, contain batrachotoxin, one of the most potent natural neurotoxins known to science. Just 2 micrograms per kilogram is enough to kill a human. This compound works by locking open sodium channels in nerve and muscle cells, preventing the normal repolarization of the cellular membrane. The result is a catastrophic failure of muscle control, including cardiac arrest. The frog, however, is immune, a product of coevolution that has rendered its sodium channels resistant to the toxin's effects. This genetic adaptation is not superficial. It is a biochemical re-engineering at the receptor level, the kind of innovation that evolution crafts only under intense and prolonged selection pressure. What makes this strategy particularly interesting from an ecological standpoint is that it is honest. In the language of evolutionary biology, an honest signal is one that is costly to produce and therefore reliable. The bright coloration of poison dart frogs, a phenomenon known as aposematism, is not a bluff. It's a visible marker of real danger. Predators who encounter these frogs quickly learn to associate color with consequence. Studies have shown that birds, once exposed to even mildly toxic individuals, avoid similarly colored prey for extended periods. This learning process reduces the need for each individual frog to defend itself physically. The population as a whole benefits from the reinforcement of the signal. Over time, this feedback loop has shaped both frog coloration and predator cognition. But not all dart frogs are equally toxic, and not all aposematic signals are the same. Within the Dendrobatidae family, toxicity and coloration exist on a spectrum. Some species are cryptic and mildly poisonous, others are flamboyant and lethally dangerous. This variation opens the door to Mullerian mimicry, where multiple toxic species converge on similar warning patterns, reinforcing predator learning across taxa. It also invites Batesian mimicry, where non-toxic species adopt the warning coloration of their deadly relatives without producing the same chemical payload. A deception that only works if it remains rare enough not to erode the signal's credibility. This mimicry dynamic turns the rainforest into a constantly shifting field of visual cues, learned responses, and evolutionary arms races between deception and detection. The ecological implications of poison dart frog toxicity go beyond individual survival. Predation pressure from these amphibians' alkaloid-rich skin influences predator foraging strategies, territory use, and even the time of day certain species hunt. Small insectivorous mammals and birds that rely heavily on visual prey detection must constantly weigh caloric gain against chemical risk. In a system where one mistake can mean neurological shutdown, the cost of curiosity is often too high. In this way, the frogs exert disproportionate influence on the food web, altering not only what gets eaten, but when and where. From a physiological perspective, the frog's skin is more than just a toxin delivery system. It is a dynamic, multifunctional organ adapted to rainforest life. Highly permeable to water and gases, amphibian skin plays a critical role in respiration and hydration. For poison dart frogs, this permeability creates a paradox. They must remain moist to breathe and survive, but that very exposure makes them vulnerable to desiccation and pathogens. To mitigate this, many species remain in high humidity microhabitats, near bromeliads along stream banks or in dense leaf litter. Their skin also produces antimicrobial peptides, some of which have shown promise in medical research as potential antibiotics or antiviral agents, another testament to the biochemical complexity hidden beneath their vivid exteriors. Reproduction among poison dart frogs is another window into their ecological intelligence. Unlike many amphibians that leave their eggs to the whims of moisture and chance, dart frogs are attentive parents. In species like Uphagapumilio, males defend territories and transport newly hatched tadpoles on their backs to water-filled bromeliads or tree holes. There, the female returns periodically to lay unfertilized eggs, a form of trophic provisioning, that the tadpoles consume. This parental investment is extraordinary among amphibians and reflects the environmental pressures of a landscape where still water is both scarce and competitive. It also suggests a level of spatial memory and kin recognition not commonly associated with small amphibians. Within the broader Amazonian ecosystem, poison dart frogs function as both indicator species and biosecurity markers. Because their toxicity depends on environmental inputs and their permeable skin makes them sensitive to pollutants, their population health reflects the integrity of the ecosystem around them. Declines in dart frog diversity often signal broader disruptions: pesticide drift, invasive species, or habitat fragmentation. Their sensitivity, once a survival liability, now positions them as early warnings in an increasingly unstable world. Yet for all their adaptations, poison dart frogs remain vulnerable to human encroachment. Their microhabitats are easily destroyed by deforestation, their chemical dependencies disrupted by the loss of specific insect prey. The pet trade, driven in part by fascination with their colors, continues to threaten wild populations, despite legal protections and captive breeding programs. The irony is sharp. An animal evolved to be untouchable is now endangered precisely because we refuse to leave it alone. In watching a poison dart frog, barely moving, its skin gleaming like polished enamel, its limbs delicately placed on moss-slick bark, one sees not just a creature of color, but a complex node in a web of evolutionary negotiations. Its warning is clear, its purpose defined. And yet, its fate, like so many others in the rainforest, is uncertain, tied to decisions made far beyond the reach of its chemical defenses. To survive here among venomous snakes, silent jaguars, and ambush predators that hunt in total silence, these frogs have chosen the most counterintuitive weapon: visibility. In doing so, they've turned their bodies into billboards of survival, not by hiding, but by daring everything else in the jungle to take the first bite. At first light, the Amazon stirs not with the chirp of birds or the rustle of leaves, but with something far deeper, a sound that rises from the canopy like a tremor through the sky. It begins low, almost imperceptible, like the groaning breath of a waking forest. Then it builds. The sound expands outward in waves, echoing off the uppermost branches, tumbling through layers of foliage until it presses against every ear in a radius of several kilometers. This is not the roar of a jaguar or the call of a raptor. It is the voice of a monkey, or more accurately, the choral projection of an entire troop of howler monkeys, a vocal broadcast so powerful that it is considered one of the loudest sounds produced by any terrestrial mammal. For these primates, sound is not a form of conversation. It is a territorial signature, a sonic fence drawn not with claws, but with resonance. In the tangled lattice of the rainforest canopy, where vision is obscured by foliage and physical movement is restricted by the peril of open leaps, the ability to hear one's neighbors, and more importantly be heard by them, becomes paramount. Howler monkeys have adapted to this vertical battlefield with a tool unmatched in the primate world, a specialized hyoid bone, enlarged and hollow, functioning as a resonating chamber deep within their throat. This bone, along with the surrounding musculature and an unusually expanded larynx, enables the howlers to project low-frequency calls across distances that would otherwise isolate groups from one another. These calls are not random. They are timed, coordinated, and aimed toward establishing auditory presence within an acoustic landscape as contested as any physical one. The function of these calls is complex, blending communication, deterrence, and resource management. Howler monkeys are folivores, relying heavily on a diet of young leaves and occasional fruit, which are both patchy and slow to regenerate. The competition for prime feeding trees is fierce, not just between species, but between neighboring troops. Rather than engage in constant physical confrontation, which carries the risk of injury and death in the high canopy, howlers have evolved a system of vocal spacing. By declaring their presence each morning through elaborate roaring sessions, they reduce the likelihood of accidental encounters. The goal is not aggression, but avoidance. The call says, "We are here, we are many. Find your own tree." Each howler troop occupies a loosely defined territory that can span 3 to 25 hectares, depending on resource availability and population density. These territories overlap at the edges, but core feeding zones, high-value trees rich in young leaves or fruit, are defended with more urgency. The roars serve to stabilize this spatial arrangement, acting as a form of auditory zoning in a dynamic and visually limited environment. In areas where troops are denser, call frequency increases. In more sparsely populated regions, calls may be less frequent but travel farther, filling the acoustic vacuum with territorial claims. This gradient reflects a broader principle in animal behavior known as the deer-enemy effect. The idea that known neighbors, while still rivals, are less threatening than unknown intruders, and therefore worth tolerating under established boundaries. The calls themselves are structurally sophisticated. They begin with deep, pulsed grunts that rise in pitch and intensity, creating a layered effect as individuals harmonize or compete within the troop. Dominant males usually initiate the calls, but females and subordinate males can join in, creating a chorus that conveys both group size and coordination, an auditory illusion of unity and strength. The acoustic energy of a single call can reach over 90 decibels and travel more than 3 kilometers through dense forest, a distance remarkable for a non-megafaunal mammal, and made possible by both anatomical design and acoustic adaptation to the rainforest environment. What makes the howler's vocalization so effective is not just its volume, but its frequency range. Low-frequency sounds attenuate less over distance and are less likely to be absorbed by foliage or interrupted by terrain. They also trigger physiological responses in many animals, including startle reflexes and orientation behavior. Predators like harpy eagles and ocelots, though not directly deterred by howler roars, are forced to account for their presence in territory calculations. Likewise, other primates, capuchins, squirrel monkeys, modify their movement paths in response to the calls, particularly if they are accompanied by visual signs of troop activity. In this way, the howler's roar becomes part of the forest's ambient information system, a constant negotiation of space through sound. Beyond their vocal capabilities, howler monkeys exhibit a suite of behavioral and physiological traits that align with their territorial strategy. Their activity is diurnal, but heavily weighted toward morning and late afternoon, corresponding with cooler temperatures and higher acoustic efficiency. Midday hours, when heat and humidity suppress sound propagation and increase thermoregulatory stress, are spent resting in the shade of dense foliage. This pattern reflects a thermally conservative energy budget, consistent with their low-calorie, leaf-based diet. Folivory, though stable in supply, demands high digestive efficiency and long periods of rest. The howler's gut is adapted for microbial fermentation with an enlarged cecum and colon that allow for the breakdown of cellulose, a process that requires time, low mobility, and minimal metabolic expenditure. Reproduction within howler troops is tightly linked to dominance hierarchies and social cohesion. Troops typically consist of 1 to 3 adult males, multiple females, and their offspring. Male takeovers can be brutal, with incoming males often killing the unweaned young of their predecessors, a form of infanticide that shortens the interbirth interval and accelerates the new male's genetic contribution to the group. These social transitions are rarely silent. Roaring escalates in both frequency and aggression during troop instability, with neighboring groups responding in turn, a kind of vocal ripple effect through the acoustic landscape. In this sense, the howler's roar is both a claim and a signal of vulnerability, revealing not just location but internal status. Juvenile howlers begin mimicking adult calls within months of birth, practicing their vocalizations long before they can contribute meaningfully to group defense. This early development suggests a strong selection pressure for acoustic competence, hinting that a howler's ability to vocalize may influence its future role within the troop. In some observed cases, young males who vocalize early and often secure better positions during troop movement or feeding, possibly influencing future reproductive success. As climate change and deforestation continue to reshape the Amazonian biome, the howler's reliance on acoustic space may face new challenges. Fragmented habitats disrupt the propagation of sound, creating acoustic shadows where calls are lost or distorted. Roads and human activity introduce anthropogenic noise that masks natural calls, a phenomenon known as acoustic pollution. These distortions can undermine the effectiveness of vocal spacing, increase troop encounters, and elevate stress levels. In this context, the howler's evolutionary reliance on sound, once a masterpiece of adaptation, could become a liability in a world growing louder and more divided. Still, for now, the forest continues to listen, and each morning, as the mist clings to the treetops and the first shafts of light breach the canopy, the air fills once more with a sound that is older than language, deeper than speech. It is not the cry of a predator. It is not a warning to flee. It is the sound of a boundary, a claim, a living signature carried on breath and bone. In the dense green corridors of the Amazon, the howler monkey does not mark its territory with tooth or claw. It marks it with the air itself and dares the world to answer. High in the tangled canopy of the Amazon, where the architecture of life stretches in every direction, upward through emergent trees, sideways through liana bridges, and downward in dangling vines, the morning sun strikes clusters of fruit hanging in dappled shade. Here, among bromeliads cradling rainwater and orchids clutching to bark like living jewelry, a flash of motion cuts through the green. A large bird with an absurdly oversized beak perches with a delicacy that belies its bulk. The toucan, a symbol of tropical abundance, does not hunt, stalk, or roar. Its power lies elsewhere, in consumption, distribution, and the silent engineering of forest futures. At first glance, the toucan may seem like a decorative oddity of the rainforest, its vibrant coloration and comically large bill suggesting a creature evolved more for aesthetic novelty than survival efficiency. But such judgments vanish when the lens of ecology is applied. The Rhamphastidae family, particularly the genus Rhamphastus, represents a lineage of highly specialized frugivores whose role in forest regeneration is as vital as that of any predator or pollinator. Toucans do not just eat fruit. They connect trees across generations and landscapes through a complex and ancient relationship rooted in mutualism, a biological partnership where both participants benefit, though not equally and rarely consciously. The toucan's primary role is as a seed disperser, a creature whose digestion serves as the forest's distribution network. The fruits they consume, often from figs, palms, laurels, and nutmegs, are swallowed whole, seeds included. Unlike many birds that crush or grind seeds, toucans pass them intact through their digestive tract, depositing them at considerable distances from the parent tree. This relocation reduces competition among seedlings, minimizes vulnerability to pathogens concentrated beneath adult trees, and increases the likelihood that seeds will land in favorable germination sites, sunlit gaps, decomposing wood, or rich leaf litter. In ecological terms, toucans function as mobile planting agents, carrying genetic material across fragmented landscapes in a way that bridges space and time. Their anatomical adaptations reveal how tightly tuned this role has become. The toucan's iconic bill, sometimes nearly the length of its body, appears cumbersome, but it is in fact a lightweight structure composed of a bony foam core encased in keratin. Despite its size, the bill is remarkably dexterous, capable of precise movements that allow the bird to reach fruit on otherwise inaccessible branches or pluck single berries from clusters without crushing them. The serrated edge of the bill offers grip, while the long elastic tongue helps maneuver slippery fruit into position for swallowing. This mechanical precision, combined with the bird's strong vision and climbing ability, makes the toucan one of the most efficient frugivores in the neotropics. But the influence of toucans extends beyond individual trees. Their dietary preferences create selective pressures on fruiting plants, particularly in relation to fruit color, size, and nutritional composition. Toucans are visual feeders, often favoring brightly colored fruits, reds, oranges, and purples that stand out in the filtered light of the canopy. Over evolutionary time, this preference has shaped the pigmentation and ripening strategies of many tropical plant species. Additionally, because toucans can swallow relatively large fruits whole, some trees have evolved seed sizes that are just within the bird's gape limit, ensuring dispersal by these feathered couriers, while excluding smaller, less mobile frugivores. This form of co-evolution, where two species shape each other's adaptations, is one of the rainforest's most intricate dances, and toucans perform their part with every meal. Their movement patterns amplify this effect. While some toucans maintain small home ranges, others, especially during times of fruit scarcity, become partial nomads, tracking seasonal fruiting cycles across vast swaths of forest. In doing so, they act as vectors of connectivity between isolated tree populations, facilitating gene flow that would otherwise be constrained by the sedentary nature of plant life. In fragmented forests such as those impacted by roads, logging, or agriculture, this dispersal capacity becomes even more critical. Toucans may be among the last remaining links between tree populations that have been genetically isolated by human activity, serving as unintentional conservationists in a rapidly changing world. Their ecological importance becomes starkly visible when absent. In regions where toucan populations have declined due to hunting, habitat destruction, or the exotic pet trade, certain tree species experience reduced recruitment. Seeds fall near parent trees, fail to germinate, or are consumed by ground-dwelling herbivores and rodents. The forest begins to shift, not immediately but gradually, toward a community composition that favors species with alternative dispersal strategies: wind, bats, or gravity. This subtle shift can lead to defaunation cascades, where the loss of a single disperser disrupts plant demographics, affects food availability for other animals, and ultimately alters ecosystem structure. The toucan, by simply doing what it has always done, prevents this unraveling. Yet toucans are not invulnerable. Their nesting strategy, dependent on natural cavities in old trees or abandoned woodpecker holes, makes them highly susceptible to logging. As old-growth trees vanish, so do the secure hollows where toucans raise their young. Their clutch size is small, their breeding cycle long, and their parental investment high. These traits, while well-suited to stable environments, make rapid recovery difficult in disturbed habitats. Furthermore, their conspicuous appearance and slow flight make them easy targets for hunters, who prize them as pets or trophies. As top-level frugivores disappear, their absence echoes through the lower canopy and the seed banks of the future. Despite these vulnerabilities, toucans remain remarkably adaptive in some contexts. In buffer zones and secondary forests, they often exploit edge habitats, feeding on pioneer species that flourish after disturbance. Their dietary breadth, though fruit-heavy, includes insects, eggs, and even small reptiles when opportunity arises. This opportunism allows them to persist in mosaics of forest and farmland, though with diminished ecological function compared to their roles in pristine systems. Still, their continued presence in transitional zones offers a foothold for restoration efforts, especially when corridors are maintained or reforestation includes fruit-bearing species that attract and retain frugivores. The story of the toucan is ultimately one of ecological diplomacy. It does not conquer or control. It collaborates. By consuming fruit and moving seed, it sustains the reproductive ambitions of hundreds of tree species. By responding to color and pattern, it shapes what fruits look like and how they are presented. And by maintaining dispersal links across space, it ensures that forests do not just regenerate, but do so with diversity, resilience, and continuity. In the great machinery of the rainforest, where every species performs a role, the toucan is not a mere ornament of color or curiosity. It is a negotiator between past and future, leaf and root, life and decay. As it flies from branch to branch, dropping seeds like whispers into the soil, it leaves behind not just the echoes of its calls, but the architecture of tomorrow's forest, one fruit at a time. In the flooded margins of the Amazon basin, where forest and water dissolve into one another with the seasons, stillness can be deceptive. What appears tranquil on the surface, a mosaic of floating vegetation, submerged tree roots, and the soft ripple of aquatic insects, often masks something else entirely. Beneath this liquid threshold lies a different kind of predator. There are no warning ripples, no distant growls, no rapid pursuit through the trees, only pressure, only silence. Then, with brutal precision, something massive stirs. The green anaconda, the largest and heaviest snake on Earth, operates in a realm where patience is lethal and motion is minimal by design. To watch an anaconda hunt is to witness a strategy so energy efficient it borders on mechanical logic. This is not a predator that chases, it waits. Buried beneath muddy silt or nestled among thick aquatic plants, its mottled olive skin camouflaged perfectly against the water's shadows. The snake's nostrils and eyes sit atop its head, allowing it to breathe and observe while remaining nearly fully submerged. Here, vision is secondary to vibration and scent. Using an array of sensitive mechanoreceptors along its body and a flicking, bifurcated tongue that samples chemical traces in the air, the anaconda reads the environment with a sensory toolkit built for ambush. Every movement from nearby prey, a shift in water pressure, a ripple from an unaware capybara or caiman, is information stored, calculated, and held until the right moment. Ambush predation, as practiced by the anaconda, is a strategy grounded in energetic economy. In the nutrient-scarce environments of floodplain forests and wetlands, energy expenditure can be costly. Pursuit hunting, like that used by felines or canids, demands high caloric intake to sustain frequent fast movement. But the anaconda's physiology is shaped for a different kind of warfare. With low basal metabolic rates and the capacity to go weeks or even months between large meals, these snakes are models of metabolic restraint. When they do strike, it is with explosive force, a rapid extension of the neck and head, jaws unhinging to clamp down on prey, followed immediately by a coiling of the muscular body that constricts with immense power. The mechanics of constriction have long fascinated biologists. Contrary to the common myth, constriction does not suffocate prey by crushing the rib cage. Instead, it works by disrupting circulation. With each breath the prey attempts to take, the coils tighten. Blood pressure spikes, cardiac output is compromised, and within seconds to minutes, the prey collapses from ischemia, a catastrophic failure of oxygen delivery to the brain and organs. This method is efficient, quiet, and adaptable. The anaconda can kill prey ranging from aquatic birds and fish to larger mammals like deer, capybara, and even juvenile tapirs. There are verified accounts of these snakes preying on caimans, apex predators in their own right, though such encounters represent the upper limits of their capacity and risk. Size in the world of anacondas is both a weapon and a limiter. Females, significantly larger than males, often exceed 5 meters in length and can weigh over 100 kilograms. Their bulk allows them to overpower larger prey and sustain longer fasting periods, which is essential during gestation. Anacondas are viviparous, giving birth to live young after carrying embryos internally for up to 7 months. This reproductive strategy, while offering the offspring a higher survival rate at birth, comes at a steep energetic cost. During this time, gravid females often cease feeding altogether, relying on stored fat reserves and maintaining positions close to water sources with adequate cover. In this phase, the stillness of the anaconda becomes not just strategic, but necessary. The aquatic environment plays a critical role in their predatory dominance. While they are capable of movement on land, their full power emerges in the water, where buoyancy offsets their massive weight and allows for greater agility. In these submerged arenas, speed is not sacrificed for size. A coiled anaconda can launch itself forward with startling velocity, striking and wrapping its coils around a target in under 2 seconds. The murky water provides both concealment and a thermal buffer, supporting their cold-blooded physiology and minimizing energy loss. This aquatic affinity also dictates their range. During the wet season, when rivers overflow and lowland forests become temporary lakes, anacondas expand their hunting grounds. As the water recedes, they retreat into oxbow lakes, swamps, and flooded forest corridors, always in pursuit of prey concentrations and suitable ambush sites. But dominance in such a specialized niche also comes with ecological trade-offs. As ambush predators, anacondas are reliant on predictability in prey behavior. Disruption to water flow, climate irregularities, or human encroachment into floodplain systems can reduce prey availability and suitable hiding sites. Moreover, their slow reproductive rates and large home ranges make them especially vulnerable to habitat fragmentation. Roads, agriculture, and hydroelectric development have already fragmented many of South America's wetland systems, effectively isolating anaconda populations and reducing genetic flow. Their role within the ecosystem, however, remains disproportionately influential. As apex predators, anacondas help regulate populations of herbivorous and omnivorous species, contributing to the balance of aquatic and semi-aquatic food webs. Their kills, often partially consumed or abandoned due to size constraints, become feeding opportunities for scavengers, vultures, caiman, and even piranhas. In this way, their presence supports a broader network of nutrient cycling. They are not just hunters, but trophic modulators, shaping the structure and flow of life within their domain. Despite their dominance, they are not immune to predation. Juvenile anacondas fall prey to wading birds, larger fish, and mammals. Even adults face risks from jaguars and large caimans, particularly during molting or post-feeding periods when mobility is reduced. But the greatest threat, predictably, is human. In some regions, anacondas are hunted out of fear, myth, or simply for spectacle. Their presence in local folklore, often exaggerated to monstrous proportions, has contributed to both awe and persecution. Yet in scientific terms, they remain one of the most understudied large vertebrates of the Amazon. Their movements, reproductive cycles, and population dynamics still only partially understood. In a world of fast chases and high metabolism, the anaconda is an evolutionary counterpoint, a creature that wins by waiting, that conquers through stillness. It is not built for endurance or speed, but for timing, leverage, and silence. To see one in the wild is to be reminded that dominance in nature does not always announce itself. Sometimes it lies beneath the surface, perfectly still, watching, waiting, measuring the world in vibrations and blood flow. When the strike finally comes, it is already too late. And in that moment, that single, coiled breath of evolutionary perfection, the water closes again, calm as before, hiding the shape that just reshaped the forest's food chain from below. Night falls fast in the Amazon. One moment, the understory pulses with the murky green haze of filtered light. The next, it is swallowed whole by darkness. Not silence, never silence, but darkness so complete that the forest shifts from a world of form and color into one of vibration and rhythm. In this nocturnal transformation, where vision for many creatures becomes less reliable, a different kind of language begins to glow. From damp clearings, over stagnant pools, along tangled vines and beneath curling leaves, tiny flashes of green, yellow, and blue pierce the black like flickers of thought. These are bioluminescent insects, beetles, fireflies, and click beetles, wielding light not for illumination, but for communication. In this world, light is not just seen, it is spoken. Bioluminescence in insects is a physiological marvel built upon the interaction of two substances, luciferin, a light-emitting molecule, and luciferase, the enzyme that triggers its reaction in the presence of oxygen, ATP, and specific cofactors. The result is a cold light, near 100% efficient, producing virtually no heat. It's a trait that evolved independently dozens of times across the tree of life. But in the rainforest, few employ it as elegantly or as functionally as these insects. Most famously, members of the family Lampyridae, known as fireflies or lightning bugs, use bioluminescence in courtship. Each pulse of light is a mating signal, a visual pheromone cast into the night, patterned in species-specific rhythms and pulses. It is not merely the brightness or frequency that matters, but the timing, the duration, and the intervals between flashes. To the untrained eye, it is chaos. But to a female perched silently nearby, one blink in 1,000 may be the perfect match. In these humid nights, the atmosphere is thick with competing signals. Dozens of firefly species may coexist in the same patch of forest, each tuned to its own frequency of light, pulse sequence, and color range. Some emit a greenish glow, others a paler yellow, and still others lean toward white or even blue, a rarity in terrestrial bioluminescence. These variations reduce interspecific confusion and reproductive interference, but they also offer evolutionary openings for deception. Among the most striking cases is thunderous, a genus of predatory fireflies. Females of this group mimic the flash patterns of other species, luring in unsuspecting males, not to mate, but to eat. This twisted strategy is a form of aggressive mimicry, and it reveals that even among organisms wielding light, the shadows of evolutionary arms races persist. But not all bioluminescent insects use light for love or lies. Some, like click beetles of the family Elateridae, possess paired light organs on the thorax and abdomen, which they can activate independently. These lights are often used for startle displays, flashes that distract or confuse predators in the critical seconds of encounter. In experiments, frogs and spiders have been shown to hesitate when faced with flashing beetles, giving the insect time to escape. Moreover, in larvae and pupae of certain species, luminescence functions as an aposematic signal, a biochemical warning that the organism is distasteful or toxic. Much like the coloration of a poisoned dart frog, light here is not invitation but deterrent. The ecological role of these insects extends far beyond courtship and self-defense. Their presence and absence can structure the behavior of predators, influence mating seasons, and even regulate the activity of other nocturnal insects. In dense forest where wind fails to carry airborne pheromones efficiently and vegetation obstructs line-of-sight vision, bioluminescence becomes an ideal medium. Light cuts through space. It crosses barriers, crosses. It can be used sparingly to minimize detection by predators or maximize to overwhelm competitors. In this way, light has become not just a signal, but an adaptable tool of ecological negotiation. The physiological investment in producing light is not trivial. While the energetic cost of each flash is low, the metabolic machinery behind it is complex and finely tuned. In some species, synchronous flashing has evolved, a behavior where entire groups of individuals, often males, flash in perfect unison, creating pulses that move through the forest like optical drumbeats. These mass displays, seen most spectacularly in Southeast Asia, but also reported in parts of South America, likely serve as mate magnet phenomena, where females are drawn to the most coordinated and brightest groups. It is a form of sexual selection writ large, where synchronization may signal fitness, genetic quality, or simply location. Juvenile stages of many bioluminescent species are themselves luminous. Firefly larvae, often called glowworms, live in moist detritus or along the edges of aquatic zones, feeding on soft-bodied invertebrates like snails and worms. Their light may function as a warning or deterrent, but in some species, it's used actively to lure prey. Bioluminescent predation traps that blur the line between bait and body. These larval stages can last several months to a year, depending on environmental conditions, with the adult stage compressed into a few weeks of fevered signaling and brief flights, an entire life orbiting around the need to be seen, but only at the right moment, by the right eye. From a conservation perspective, bioluminescent insects offer an overlooked metric for environmental health. Many species are highly sensitive to light pollution, pesticide exposure, and hydrological disruption, particularly those that rely on moist soil or ephemeral pools for reproduction. As human settlements expand and artificial lighting encroaches upon formerly dark habitats, flash synchronization breaks down, mate finding becomes less efficient, and population viability declines. In agricultural zones, the overuse of insecticides can reduce larval survivorship long before the flicker of adult courtship is even possible. These creatures are not only biological curiosities, they are indicators, living metrics of how the night itself is being changed. And yet in the right conditions, deep in undisturbed forest during the rainy season, the spectacle endures. The canopy may hold the booming chorus of howler monkeys, the ground may ripple with the passage of army ants, but in the darkness between, the lights dance. Slow at first, scattered and uncertain, then building, thousands of signals, independent but intertwined, pulsing through space in search of recognition. It is not chaos. It is coded biology, played out in wavelengths and silence. Bioluminescent insects remind us that evolution does not just speak in fang or flight. Sometimes it whispers in light. In the heart of the forest's night, when eyes are open and voices rest, it is the smallest beings who send out signals of purpose and place. They do not light the jungle for us. They light it for one another, messages not meant for our understanding, but revealed all the same if we know how to watch. At ground level, the rainforest hums with chaos. Leaves rot beneath layers of decaying bark and fungus-laced detritus. Roots twist like exposed nerves through the soil. But occasionally, cutting across this disorder, a pattern emerges. A narrow trail etched into the undergrowth with geometric precision. Along it, a living river flows, columns of leafcutter ants, each one carrying a fragment of green overhead, like a sail in a procession. The visual is iconic, but also deeply misleading. These ants, known scientifically as atta and acromyrmex, are not foragers in the traditional sense. They are farmers, and what they carry is not food, but fertilizer. Leafcutter ants represent one of the most advanced examples of non-human agriculture on the planet. The leaves they harvest are not consumed directly. Instead, they serve as the substrate for an internal fungal crop, cultivated inside the nest with conditions so precisely managed that it rivals greenhouse farming in sophistication. The ants collect leaf fragments with surgical efficiency, trim them into chewable pulp, and deposit the material into subterranean chambers. There, specialized worker castes inoculate the leaf matter with a symbiotic fungus, Leucoagaricus gongylophorus, which breaks down the plant tissue into digestible nutrients. In return, the fungus produces gongylidia, nutrient-rich swellings that the ants consume as their sole food source. This system is not a side effect of foraging behavior. It is the colony's entire economic foundation, developed through over 50 million years of co-evolution. Inside the colony, a superorganism functions. With populations exceeding 5 million individuals in a single nest, leafcutter colonies require a degree of internal organization that borders on the computational. Task differentiation is not optional, it is genetically and behaviorally enforced. Workers are divided into highly specialized castes: foragers who navigate and harvest, minima who ride atop leaf fragments to ward off parasitic flies, media who process leaves into pulp, gardener ants who tend and weed the fungus, and massive soldiers whose oversized mandibles serve as deterrents to predators and rival colonies. This caste system is not rigidly hierarchical, but finely tuned to environmental conditions and internal needs. Individual ants can change roles as the colony's requirements shift, displaying remarkable behavioral plasticity for insects governed by instinct. What makes this agricultural model so ecologically fascinating is the mutualism at its core. The ants and the fungus have become completely interdependent. The fungus cannot survive outside the colony. It has lost the ability to produce spores and reproduce independently. The ants, in turn, rely exclusively on the fungus for sustenance. Disruption of one partner invariably leads to collapse of the other. Moreover, this mutualism is defended against intruders not just with mandibles, but with chemical warfare. Leafcutter ants harbor symbiotic bacteria, pseudonocardia, on their exoskeletons, which secrete antibiotics that suppress the growth of parasitic fungi like Escovopsis, a dangerous fungal pathogen that targets the ant's crop. This three-way alliance, ant, fungus, bacterium, represents a multi-kingdom symbiosis that has evolved into a miniature, self-regulating agricultural biosphere. The scale of their operations has consequences for the surrounding ecosystem. Leafcutter ants are among the dominant herbivores in neotropical forests, capable of stripping entire trees of foliage in a matter of days. Estimates suggest that in some regions, they account for up to 15% of all leaf biomass removed annually. This activity shapes plant succession, influences forest structure, and creates canopy gaps that allow light to reach the understory. Their excavations, vast underground networks spanning dozens of meters with hundreds of chambers, also aerate the soil and alter its composition. Leafcutter colonies function like ecological engineers, unintentionally remodeling the forest in service of their subterranean harvest. Navigation within the colony and across vast foraging routes involves a remarkable use of chemical signaling. Pheromone trails laid down by scout ants allow for efficient recruitment, resource assessment, and route optimization. These trails are dynamic, adjusted in strength and direction depending on wind, humidity, and interference. Ants can even switch to vibrational communication by drumming their mandibles against the substrate to alert others when encountering resistance or obstacles. What emerges is a decentralized network of feedback and response, akin to biological algorithms that allow the colony to self-correct and adapt in real time. Reproduction and colony founding represent the most vulnerable stages in a leafcutter's life cycle. Each mature colony produces reproductive males and virgin queens during specific seasons, timed with environmental cues like rainfall and temperature. These winged ants engage in nuptial flights, where queens mate mid-air with multiple males, collecting sperm that will last their entire lives, sometimes over a decade. After landing, the queen sheds her wings and, critically, carries a small pellet of fungal spores from her parent colony in a specialized mouth pouch. This fungal inoculum will seed her new garden. If she fails to establish a viable fungal culture, she dies. No second chance, no alternate food plan. Her survival and the survival of the colony-to-be depends entirely on successfully restarting the mutualism. Despite their ecological importance, leafcutter ants are not immune to conflict. Colonies compete for foraging space, and aggressive encounters between rival nests can escalate into prolonged battles, with thousands of casualties on both sides. These wars are not random but occur along territory lines, often in open clearings or narrow trails where two empires meet. Even within colonies, worker policing can occur, particularly over reproductive roles or responses to queen pheromones. What appears to be unity is actually maintained through an intricate set of internal rules and chemical reinforcements. Their agricultural system also offers sobering lessons in sustainability and collapse. When a colony overharvests from a particular region or fails to manage fungal pathogens effectively, the system breaks down. The fungus weakens, leaf processing slows, the worker population declines, and the colony enters a terminal feedback loop. This vulnerability reflects a broader ecological truth, that even the most ancient and successful systems are susceptible to environmental change and internal imbalance. To watch leafcutter ants work is to see a biological civilization in miniature. There are no overseers, no written codes, no conscious plans. And yet, out of millions of simple behaviors emerges a pattern of cooperation, agriculture, and resilience that has endured for tens of millions of years. They are not building cities, they are building farms. Beneath the forest floor, under logs and between roots, lies one of Earth's most enduring achievements in shared labor and ecological partnership. In the great vertical kingdom of the rainforest, where vines stretch toward light and jaguars roam in silence, the leafcutter ants move unnoticed beneath it all, not as prey or predator, but as architects of a deeper order. Their story is not of domination, but of cultivation. Their power lies not in destruction, but in growth sustained through cooperation. And as they carry their green flags along narrow paths, they are not marching to war, but to work, feeding a fungal heart that, in turn, feeds them all. In the dense green chaos of the Amazon rainforest, survival is rarely solitary. Sunlight, filtered through towering hardwoods and thick tangles of epiphytes, splinters into gold as it touches the forest floor. The air is saturated with movement. Wings flicker overhead, leafcutters march below, and the endless soundtrack of dripping water and insect buzz frames every hour. Here, among the strangler figs and liana bridges, life unfolds in layered complexity, each species locked into a web of interactions that spans the vertical and horizontal reach of the forest. Nowhere is this interdependence more intricate or more revealing than in the dynamic alliances formed among mixed-species primate troops. a behavioral strategy that transforms the jungle's lethal unpredictability into a collaborative advantage. In a world of stalkers and ambush predators, where a split-second warning can mean the difference between escape and obliteration, eyes and ears become as valuable as claws or teeth. Some primates, rather than relying solely on the vigilance of their own group, expand their social reach by cohabiting with other species, forming temporary or even seasonal multi-species associations. These composite troops, often consisting of 2 to 5 different monkey species, share space, resources, and most importantly, information. A behavioral adaptation rooted in the logic of predator evasion and efficient foraging. In the Amazon, common examples of such alliances include squirrel monkeys, capuchins, and occasionally tamarins, which move together in overlapping strata of the forest. Squirrel monkeys, small and alert, typically range through the lower and mid-canopy, while capuchins, larger, stronger, and more cognitively advanced, operate higher and more aggressively. Tamarins, fast-moving and less dominant, exploit edge zones and understory gaps. Each species brings a unique ecological toolkit: different vision ranges, call systems, movement speeds, and dietary preferences. This niche partitioning reduces direct competition and allows for more complete resource use within the shared territory. But the primary driver of these associations is anti-predator defense. Jungle predators are diverse and often invisible until they strike. Raptors, like the harpy eagle, descend through open canopy with terrifying speed. Felids, margays, ocelots, and jaguars creep across vines and trunks with near-silent precision. Even large snakes like boa constrictors pose threats, especially to juveniles. By banding together, these primates multiply their defensive capacity. With more individuals watching different angles and elevations, the collective vigilance increases dramatically. One squirrel monkey may miss the flicker of wings above, but in a mixed species troop of 50, the odds of detection rise exponentially. And when a predator is sighted, the alarm calls of one species often trigger a cascade response in the others, each with its own repertoire of vocalizations, many of which have been learned or interpreted across species lines. Field studies have shown that in mixed species troops, predator detection times decrease by as much as 50%, and escape behaviors become more synchronized. Squirrel monkeys, for example, are particularly adept at recognizing raptor threats and respond with upward glances, tail flicks, and sharp whistles. Capuchins, in contrast, are more reactive to terrestrial predators and use deep barks or branch-shaking displays to signal alarm. Over time, these species have developed the ability to decode each other's warning systems, a remarkable example of cross-species communication not based on mimicry, but mutual learning. Young monkeys raised in mixed groups often become fluent in these alarm dialects, responding to warnings from species they never interbreed with and rarely groom. Foraging behavior also benefits from these temporary alliances. Because each species specializes in different food types, fruits, insects, nectar, or small vertebrates, resource overlap is minimized. Capuchins use their dexterous hands and high cognitive flexibility to crack open nuts, dislodge insects from bark, and even use rudimentary tools. Squirrel monkeys flit between branches at high speeds, picking off caterpillars and soft fruits with precision. Tamarins dart into dense foliage to exploit flower clusters and insect swarms. When these species forage together, they increase efficiency by reducing redundancy, but also by learning from each other. Capuchins, the most curious and problem-solving of the group, may reveal new food sources or methods, which younger or more observant individuals of other species can mimic. This process, interspecific social learning, adds another layer of intelligence to the ecological dynamic. However, such associations are not without tension. Dominant species may monopolize rich food patches, displace subordinates from perching sites, or assert control over movement decisions. Capuchins, for example, can become aggressive if provoked, and squirrel monkeys often defer to them in contested scenarios. Despite these frictions, the benefits, reduced predation, enhanced food discovery, and greater group cohesion, generally outweigh the costs. These mixed troops are not harmonious societies, but temporary alliances of calculated convenience, constantly negotiating space, leadership, and shared risk. Beyond the canopy, these associations influence the broader forest ecology. Mixed species primate groups disperse seeds across wide territories, often transporting them further than single-species troops due to their extended range and travel speed. Because different species prefer different fruit types, the diversity of seeds dispersed increases with group complexity. Their movements also affect the behavior of predators, who must adapt to the presence of larger, louder, and more vigilant groups. Raptors may avoid troop-rich areas altogether. Ground predators, sensing more potential alarm calls or distractions, alter their hunting routes. In this way, the mere presence of cooperative networks reshapes the risk landscape of the rainforest. The evolution of such behavior raises deep questions. What cognitive thresholds are required for one species to recognize the utility of another's presence? How do these alliances form in the first place, and why do they persist? Researchers believe that environmental unpredictability, such as fluctuating food availability or variable predator pressure, favors flexible, opportunistic groupings. In times of scarcity or heightened danger, the forest becomes less a territory to defend and more a shared resource to navigate together, with success measured not by dominance, but by detection, escape, and memory. Perhaps most intriguing is the subtle implication that cooperation, not just competition, lies at the heart of tropical biodiversity. While evolutionary biology has often emphasized conflict as the driver of change, arms races, selection pressure, territoriality, these mixed species primate troops suggest another pathway. That collaboration, even among strangers, can unlock survival strategies no individual species could manage alone. In the context of a constantly shifting forest, filled with hidden predators and ephemeral food sources, the ability to share space and learn from others may be one of the most adaptive behaviors of all. In the end, the jungle is not a static web, but a shifting network of relationships in motion. In the rustling of branches and the flicker of tails above, these alliances come alive, temporary coalitions of primates who, for a few days or weeks, share not just the trees, but the risks and rewards of life beneath the canopy. Their bonds may be fleeting, but their impact reverberates far beyond their brief companionships, shaping the very rhythm of survival in one of Earth's most complex and competitive ecosystems.